Hello there, and welcome to another feng shui lesson where you learn about feng shui while I tell you a story. And today I would like to share with you about the really bizarre way in which I was guided to sign up in the School of Architecture. So this is what happened. That before I tell you the story, I need to make sure I am sharing to the group. So just bear with me for a moment. I need to get this, there you go. I need to get the tech down. All right. So when I graduated high school, I wanted to take a year off because I had so many extracurricular activities. I was a class president, and I was in so many different groups that I finished my senior year completely exhausted. So I take like a sabbatical year to rest and make sure I made a good decision about college. 1 year later, when I was supposed to make a decision, I had actually decided to study a type of engineering in a school that is similar to MIT. I was really good at math. It had never occurred to me the idea that I could study architecture, but I was also really good at art, drawing and painting. So people over the years, they had told me, you should consider being an architect because you are good at math and you're good at art, and that is a profession that puts the two together. But I had not actually ever considered it seriously. But this morning, so I wake up and I hear a voice, but it's like I hear a voice. It was more like as if somebody was trying to communicate with me telepathically. I didn't actually hear the voice, but I wake up and I hear this voice that says, you should go register in the School of Architecture today. And I brushed it off and I woke up and I kept going about my business. But the voice kept getting more insistent and kind of louder, right? Go register to the School of Architecture before. So finally I went and got a phone book. That's how long ago that was. And so I get a phone book because I didn't even know where the School of Architecture was. So I found the phone book, I looked for the School of Architecture and jot down the address and go there, right? And so I get to the school and I go to where the registrations were in the main office. And there's these windows and these secretaries behind the windows, but there's a huge sign that says registrations are closed until next year. Do not insist. So I knock on the window because I was going to insist anyway. And so they were like sliding windows, so they open it up and they say yes. And I say, I did read your sign, but I was wondering if there's any exceptions, that anything I can do to register this year. And she tells me, no, read the sign. And she shuts down the window, right? And so I was thinking, what is this? I just heard that so clearly this morning that I should register in the School of Architecture. And I do it. And now they shut the door kind of symbolically in front of me, right? That evening, I went to a computer course that I was taking. While I was taking my sabbatical year, I had started taking a basic course on computers because I want to learn about computers and basic programming. That night, I go to my class and I sit next to a woman who didn't even like me. And I don't know for what reason. I start telling her what happened that morning. I went to School of Architecture and there was a huge sign that said, registrations are closed until next year. And she tells me, well, I have an uncle that works at the university. Maybe he can help you. And I said, well, does he work in the School of Architecture? And she said, no, he works in human resources, but maybe he can help you. And I say, well, I don't think so. I think it would be a waste of time. And she said, no, my uncle will help you. Remember, this was a person that didn't even like me. And so she says, tomorrow morning, she says, I'm going to give you a call tomorrow morning after I talk to my uncle, because this was an evening class. So the next morning she calls me and she says, I have talked to my uncle and this is the address, go to his office and he's going to help you. So I'm like, okay. So I go to his office and I introduce myself and he says, yeah, my niece told me about you. And so tell us what we can do for you. And so I explained the situation, right? I wanted to register for School of Architecture, but registrations are closed. And so he calls a woman that worked in the same office, and he says, "This is Ines. I introduce you to Ines. She used to work in the School of Architecture, so maybe she can help you." So again, I explained the situation to her. So she makes a phone call, right? And she talks to somebody, a secretary in the School of Architecture. And she's like, "Oh, how's the family and all that, the small talk." And then she says, "Hey, I was wondering if you can help me with something." And she explains my situation. And so the secretary, is talking to her, and then she's nodding and nodding, said yes, and she's taking notes. And then she hangs up. And she looks at me and she says, "This is what you need to do. You need to write a letter apologizing and explaining for not registering on time and asking for an exception to your case. This is how you need to do it. And then you need to go and talk to this person and say that I sent you. And you need to take $300 in cash. Can you do that?" And I was like, "Okay, I can do that." But I was going to take her notes and go, right? And then instead, she turns around and she types the whole letter for me. And she just asks for my information, like a full names and date of birth and all my data. And she writes the letter for me, and she prints it out in really nice stationery paper, so that the only thing that I have to do is sign it. And I did that. And then, so I go home, get the money, and then go register. So I arrived with a letter that she typed for me that all I had to do is sign. And this secretary at the School of Architecture was waiting for me, and she was all smiles. And I got registered that day. And after that happened, I go home and I'm thinking, this was so clearly the voice from heaven. It was a voice from heaven guiding me to do something that I need to do. But what I don't understand, and you're probably asking the same thing, why did this voice not tell me a week ago to go register to the School of Architecture when all I had to do is show up and sign up? And instead waited until registrations were closed. And so I had to go through this whole thing, right? And you might think, okay, maybe it's because it's one way that God wanted me to know that I was being guided. But I think that more important than that, it had to do with the class where they put me in. So they put me in a class with all the people who had signed up last. And in that class, my very first day of class, I met two people that would become very important in my life. I went to the school, so my first day of class, my whole life, from when I had been in kindergarten until I graduated as a senior in high school, I went to the same school, in the same building, and it was an all-girls Catholic school. And all of a sudden, I'm thrown into this environment, which is where it's co-ed. It's a public university. In Ecuador, it was the only school of architecture in my city. And it's people from all walks of life. And I walked into the class and I felt intimidated. So I walked back out, and while we were waiting for the teacher to arrive. And the building was really nice, and all the classes came out to open balconies that were also hallways. And so I'm leaning on the balcony, and this one guy comes and says hello to me, introduces himself, we start talking. Then when we go into the class, when the teacher's there, and he sits next to me, and then this other guy sits next to me on the other side, and he introduces to me. So the guy that sat next to my right that day, he's still a friend today. And we graduated together. We started school on the same day, and we graduated together. We were thesis teammates. So we worked on our graduate thesis together, and we graduated together. We were really well together. He was really strong in the things that I was weak, and I was really strong in the things that he was weak. And so we made a really good team. And the other guy, the first guy that had introduced himself to me, he later on, 3 years later, he would convince me to try an experimental branch of the School of Architecture, where I met the teachers and I learned the subjects that I needed to learn to later on understand feng shui better, and to put together the 9 steps to feng shui system. So the 9 steps to feng shui system is made up of form school feng shui, which is the most ancient and reliable school of feng shui. the principles of modern architecture that I learned in the experimental branch of the School of Architecture, where this friend guided me to, and also the principles of ancient East Asian healing. So the same principles behind acupuncture, Qigong, and martial arts even are what gave rise to Feng Shui. So that is the story. It's a really bizarre thing, right? Of how I was guided that day to register for the School of Architecture when I had never, ever considered this seriously. I would love to hear from you. If you have felt that there were times in your life when you were guided to do something that maybe even didn't make sense to you at the time, but on hindsight, it shows you how you were being guided through a path. So if you have any stories like that, share them with me in the comments. I would love to hear from you. In Feng Shui, right, there's a life area called career, life missions, and individuality. And that life area is located in the middle of the front wall. So the front wall, the wall that has your front door, the very middle of that wall, that is where your career, life mission, and individuality life area is located. And that has to do with your life purpose. And one of the core beliefs in Feng Shui is that heaven is constantly guiding you and giving you little nudges to get you on your path. So for me, part of what I needed to do for my Feng Shui journey was to first study architecture so that I could understand Feng Shui, so that I could disentangle Feng Shui, so that I could sift through Feng Shui knowledge from all the superstitions that had become attached to Feng Shui over the years. Going through 6.5 year architecture career, that was part of my path to learn everything I needed to learn so that I could understand the concepts I needed to understand, and then put together this new system. And of course, there were other things. Heaven put me in the path of other teachers, other kinds of learnings along the way that became instrumental in putting together the system. Again, if you have any stories like this, please share them with me. I really, really love to hear these stories. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.